You know, in just the time it takes you to watch this, millions of photos are going to be posted and billions of messages sent. We are all citizens of this massive digital world, right? But what does it actually mean to be a good one? That's what we're going to get into.
Okay, picture this. You hit post. In that very first second, your photo stops being just a photo. It becomes data. And it's just hurtling through networks, getting copied, and yeah, it can potentially be seen by anyone, anywhere. That one little click kicks off this whole journey. And understanding that journey, well, that's the key to navigating our digital lives.
So to really get a grip on that journey, we've got to start with the absolute basics. And don't worry, it's not as complex as you might think. It really just boils down to how we turn simple, raw facts into powerful, usable knowledge.
I like to think of it like climbing a ladder. Right at the bottom, you've got raw data. Then we take that data and we organize it into something useful. That's information. And then right at the very top, we use that information to build knowledge and, actually make smart decisions.
All right, let's start at the bottom rung of that ladder, data. Just think of it like the raw ingredients for a cake. You've got your flour, your sugar, your eggs. On their own, they're just a bunch of items sitting on your counter. They've got potential for sure, but they don't really mean anything yet. Okay, now, let's take those raw ingredients and throw in a recipe. All of a sudden, those random items have some context, right? 1 cup of flour, 2 eggs, that is information. It's data that's been organized and given meaning, turning it from a pile of stuff into a useful set of instructions. And finally, we get to the very top of the ladder, knowledge. This is where you take that recipe, that information, and you use your own experience and skill to bake an amazing cake. Knowledge is really about the ability to apply information to solve a problem, or, create something delicious.
So we've got this incredibly powerful thing we call information. But what happens when we just release it into the wild? How does it actually travel? And what makes it so different from how things worked back in the pre-digital age? Let's take a look.
You see, digital information has these 3, let's call them superpowers, that make it totally unique. First, it is persistent. Once something's online, it is nearly impossible to completely erase. Second, it's reproducible. A photo can be copied 1,000,000 times, and there's zero loss in quality. And third, it propagates. It spreads like wildfire all across the globe in seconds. Seriously, just think about a viral tweet. It's the perfect example of these 3 forces just exploding at once.
And we're actually experiencing information through these different types of media every single day, probably without even thinking about it. So let's say you're watching a video on your phone. The video itself, that's the expression media. The internet that's delivering it to you, that's the propagation media. And then when you save that video to your phone, you're using recording media. See? We're constantly juggling all 3.
Now, with all this information flying at us from every direction, we desperately need a way to sort through the noise. And that's where media literacy comes in. Honestly, it's like an essential toolkit that helps you evaluate what you're seeing and really understand the messages hiding behind it. And that media literacy toolkit, it is absolutely essential for the next step on our journey, becoming a real critical thinker. This is all about shifting from being a passive consumer of information to an active investigator. Okay, a huge part of being a critical thinker is knowing the difference between primary and secondary sources. A primary source is the original stuff, like an interview with an eyewitness, right from the source. A secondary source is someone else's take on it, like a news report about that interview. And here's the danger. Secondary sources can be packed with opinions and biases you might not even notice.
And this brings us to what might be the single most important question you can ever ask when you come across new information. How do you know that? It's so simple, but that little question forces you to dig deeper, to question the sources, and to actually look for the evidence.
So, what's a practical way to answer how do you know that? It's by cross-checking. Seriously, don't just rely on a single source for anything important. Instead, go look for that same information from multiple, independent sources. If they all seem to line up, then you can be a lot more confident that what you're seeing is the real deal.
But, being a critical thinker isn't just about how we consume information. It's also about how we create and share it. And that brings us to our digital responsibilities, sort of the unwritten rules of being a good digital citizen. Look, there are some really clear lines that we just should never cross online. Things like violating copyright, leaking someone's personal information, invading their privacy, and of course, cyberbullying. These aren't just rude. These are actions that cause real, genuine harm, and they break down the trust that makes our digital communities even work in the first place.
And here's a modern responsibility a lot of us just completely overlook. That cute photo you just snapped of your new puppy in your living room, well, it probably has something called a geotag embedded in it. That's hidden data that pinpoints your exact location. So when you post that photo, you could literally be giving the entire world a map right to your front door. Think about that.
And finally, we all have a responsibility to keep our shared information space clean. I'm talking about disinformation. That's false information that's deliberately spread to deceive people. It's basically like pollution for our minds. And every single time we share something without checking it first, we risk becoming part of the problem.
So far, we've been talking a lot about how to be responsible digital citizens. But what happens when people act irresponsibly? In this last section, we're going to look at some of the very real dangers that exist online. The first danger is one that's actually pretty easy to miss, mostly because it's become so common. I'm talking about internet addiction. It's a real thing, where our online lives start to totally overshadow our real-world responsibilities and relationships. It's like we're in a constant battle for our own attention.
Now, beyond the dangers we might pose to ourselves, there are also people out there who actively use the internet to harm others. Cybercrime is the big, broad term for pretty much any illegal activity that involves a computer or a network, and it can range from simple scams to really sophisticated attacks.
And one of the most common types of cybercrime you'll hear about is identity theft. This is where a criminal gets a hold of your personal information to impersonate you, usually to get money. It's a really powerful and kind of scary reminder of just how incredibly valuable your personal data really is.
And that brings us all the way back to that first second after you click post. Every single action we take online is a choice that shapes not just our own digital identity, but the digital world that all of us share. We've looked at how information works, what our responsibilities are as creators, and the dangers that are lurking out there. So the final question isn't just about what you're posting. It's about who you are choosing to be in this massive, interconnected digital world.